Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for our webinar on smart charging in Massachusetts today. My name is Anna Vanderspek, and I'm the Electric Vehicle Program Director at Green Energy Consumers Alliance, and I'm glad so many of you are interested in getting into the weeds of smart charging. We have a jam-packed schedule today, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who aren't familiar with Green Energy Consumers Alliance, we are a nonprofit organization based in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and our mission is to harness our power as energy consumers to speed the transition to a low-carbon future. What that means is we have a series of programs and services that help people access different clean energy technologies. And one of those programs is the Drive Green program, which we've been running since 2016 and helps educate people about the benefits of electric cars and then help them make the switch to one when they're ready. So this webinar is part of that effort, so you can learn more about charging your car at the right times on the New England electric grid. A couple of logistics real quick. Everyone is muted to avoid background noise, but we absolutely welcome your participation. So throughout the webinar, please do send questions via the chat box. We'll have a good chunk of time at the end of the webinar for Q&A, and we definitely want to answer your questions, so please go ahead and write those in. And just as a heads up, we are recording this webinar, and we'll share a recording as well as the slides after the webinar. So first things first, some introductions. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Anna. I work with Green Energy Consumers, and I will be starting us off with a quick introduction to the concept of smart charging, and I'll turn it over to our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves. I guess, Hannah, do you want to go ahead? It looks like Sejal has frozen.
Sure. I'm Hannah Lyons. I'm an energy efficiency consultant at Eversource, and worked on demand response programming for about 4 years.
Sejal, are you there?
Yeah, it looks like she might have frozen.
She'll come back, but by the time we get to her, I hope. But Sejal is the Senior Program Manager at National Grid, and she'll be talking about the off-peak charging rebate that National Grid offers, as well as the Connected Solutions Program. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about smart charging. So the first thing we'll talk about is just why are we even here? So smart charging, the phrase when I use that, refers to intentionally charging your electric vehicle at times when it best suits the grid. So long story short, basically, it really matters when you charge your electric car. It matters both in terms of emissions and also in terms of costs. So the first thing I'll say is that there's a lot of misconceptions still about how clean electric cars are in the first place. So the first thing I want to do is do some myth busting. Electric cars are cleaner than gas-powered cars already on average when you plug them into the New England power grid. So this is a graph comparing emissions on a per mile basis from gas-powered cars, plug-in hybrids, and battery electric vehicles. This data is from the Union of Concerned Scientists, and it is based on your zip code. So if you are within the New England power grid, these are your comparative emissions. So a gas-powered car emits about 381 grams of carbon dioxide emissions per mile driven. When you plug a plug-in hybrid into the New England power grid, you cut your emissions about in half on a per mile basis. And if you go all the way to a battery electric vehicle, you cut your emissions by more than 3/4. Many of you who are on this webinar might actually have even cleaner electricity than this. So first of all, Massachusetts has some really important state laws that require electric utilities to add more renewable energy to the grid every year. So Massachusetts already has a cleaner grid than New England in general. But many of you are either choosing 100% local renewable energy through our Green Powered program, or perhaps live in a community with a green municipal aggregation program. So your emissions are even lower on a per mile basis if you're driving an electric car than this graph shows. Another point we want to make is that the electric grid is just getting cleaner over time. So the emissions that I showed on the previous graph really overstate emissions for the next decade. So on this graph, we've done some math. The top line shows you how the fleet of gas-powered cars is expected to get cleaner over time because of federal efficiency standards. But the line on the bottom shows you if you buy an electric vehicle, or if you bought an electric vehicle in 2021 and keep charging it on the electric grid, that same electric vehicle is just going to get cleaner over time as we add more renewable energy to the electric grid. So by 2030, a vehicle that you bought this year will actually produce fewer emissions than it does right now because of those state laws that I mentioned. So this is all, these two slides have all been on an average basis, on an annual basis. But what we'll talk about today is that emissions on a per kilowatt hour basis change all the time on our electric grid because demand changes all the time on our electric grid. So the sort of first key foundational concept for the idea of smart charging is that demand for electricity varies throughout the year. So again, the previous slides have shown average emissions, taking into account all of the different generators that feed into the grid in New England, but exactly what generators are switched on, so to speak, changes throughout the year. As you can see on this graph, this is a graph that shows monthly peak demand for the ISO New England region. ISO New England is the manager of the power grid for the New England states. And you can see that for the past couple of years, and many more years than this graph shows, the peak occurs in the summer. So basically starting every June, demand or peak demand on a monthly basis jumps from under 20,000 megawatts to well over 20,000 megawatts. Right now, New England as a whole is a summer peaking area. As we electrify more and more heating, we're expected to shift to a winter peaking area, but that is still a ways away. So for now, it's really in the summer when everybody's turning on their air conditioning in particular that we see those peaks. So demand for electricity varies throughout the year, but it also varies throughout the day and throughout the month. And this is where we really start thinking about smart charging. So there are two graphs on this slide, and each shows the demand chart for New England throughout 2 different days in June of 2021. So you can see that throughout the day, they follow a pretty similar pattern. Demand is pretty low in the early morning hours. It starts ramping up around 8 a.m. It ramps up pretty steadily throughout the day, hits a peak at about 7 p.m., and then declines pretty quickly over the rest of the day. So that is what we call a demand curve for a day. And most of the year, that's the same pattern that you see. Low in the morning, ramping up to evening, and then ramping down again. What these two graphs side by side show us is how very different 2 days in the same month can be. So on each of these graphs, the blue line shows you the projected electricity demand, and the orange line shows you the actual demand on 2 different days in June of 2021. So on June 17th, 2021, which is the graph on the left, the peak demand was about 15,000 megawatts. And that daily peak is about what you'd expect the whole monthly peak to be in an April. When the weather is slightly cooler. But just 10 days earlier on June 7th, that's the graph on the right, the peak demand was over 22,000 megawatts, which is 52% higher. So that 22,000 megawatts is high enough to be considered a system peak. So that's one of the highest demand days of the whole summer, or of the whole year, I should say, occurred on that June 7th, 2021. So again, electricity demand varies throughout the day, and you have a daily peak which is illustrated on these two graphs, but then we also have system peak days like June 7th, 2021, when the demand is one of the highest moments of the whole year. In both of these cases, a natural question is, how do we handle that? How does the electric grid meet demand? And the answer is by turning on more power plants. So on a normal day, a day where there isn't a system peak, the production of electricity increases throughout the day, and the marginal fuel, aka the sort of last turned on fuel, is pretty consistently fracked gas. So as electricity ramps up throughout the day, fracked gas power plants or natural gas power plants ramp up energy production. That, excuse me, is not necessarily a good thing. We, for climate reasons, obviously want to reduce the use of fossil fuels, but it's not as bad as what happens on system peak days. So here is an example of the demand chart, or the fuel mix, sorry, on a system peak day. So this was August 12th, 2021. And you can see that throughout the day, natural gas electricity production really ramped up, but oil and coal also made it into the mix. Those are the black and brown strips on this graph. Some of you may have heard of the term peaker plant, and this is likely what these plants are. These are electricity generation plants that turn on just a couple of hours in the year, specifically to meet demand on system peak days. And those do tend to be older oil and coal fired power plants, which are disproportionately polluting and also disproportionately expensive. So this is one of the reasons why reducing system peak days or system peaks is particularly important, because we can have an outsized impact both in terms of pollution and in terms of cost. So to illustrate this point about costs, I have this graph, which might look intimidating and busy from the get-go, but we'll walk through it and hopefully it should make sense. So on this graph, we are comparing electricity demand and electricity prices on two different days in 2021, a peak day and a non-peak day. So the blue line that you see going across the graph represents demand on a non-peak day. And you can see that demand starts at about 10,000 megawatts and makes it up just above 15,000 megawatts, which should sound familiar from a couple slides ago, that is what is normally a monthly peak in April, might be around 15,000 megawatts. And so this is a pretty temperate day in June 2021. If you look down at the bottom of the graph, you see a bar graph, and that represents the costs. So you can see that on that normal day in June 2021, electricity costs are pretty low and pretty stable. They're well under $50 per megawatt hour, and they don't really change all that much throughout the day. If we switch then to look at the summer peak day, which is represented in red, you can see that demand starts off higher and reaches a much higher peak than on that normal day. So it starts somewhere between 15 and 20,000 megawatts, makes it up over 25,000 megawatts, which is really quite a lot, and then decreases back down to about where it started. But what you see very vividly on this graph is that the prices increase a lot. So the prices already start off higher. If you look at the bottom left at the first red bar, you can see that the prices start just under $50 per megawatt hour. But over the course of the day, they make it up over or just up over $350 per megawatt hour, almost reaching $400, which is a really incredible jump. So what this graph illustrates is that on a peak day where demand maybe doubles, prices increase nearly 10 times. So this really hopefully drives home the point that these system peak days are really disproportionately expensive for the electric grid. So this statement, every time I read it, astounds me again, which is that just 1% of the hours of the year account for 8% of the costs of running the electric grid, and 10% of the hours account for 40% of the costs. So as we bring more and more electric vehicles onto the grid, We don't want to exacerbate those peaks. We don't want to make those peak moments any higher. We really want to decrease them. So if we bring that back to you and your electric car, it is always a good idea to avoid charging your electric car during a peak period, whether that is a daily peak or a system peak. But it's really especially important to not charge during system peak moments. And there are a couple of different types of programs that electric utilities can put in place to incentivize you, the driver, to shift your charging to a time that is not peak. One option is an off-peak charging rebate, which can reward you for shifting your charging away from daily peaks by offering a lower price per kilowatt hour when you charge off-peak. And then there are demand response programs which target those system peaks and reward you for reducing or stopping your charging in those 1 or 2 or 3% of hours over the course of the year when demand is highest. So our two panelists today will talk to programs of each of these types. And I will now hopefully turn this over to Sejal from National Grid to talk about National Grid's program. And Sejal, I will give you the keyboard so you can advance your slides.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Green Energy Consumers Alliance for setting this up. Anna, that was a great summary of a very complicated topic. So I really appreciate you going through that because that sets me up really nice to discuss our two programs. Are the slides moving on your end? I think I have a delay on mine. Just want to confirm.
They are.
Great.
If you prefer, I'm happy to advance them for you.
Would you mind, because it's not working for me on my end? Oh, there it is. All right, so National Grid has two programs, and as Anna mentioned, there's the system peak and the daily peak. So to address the system peak, we have the Connected Solutions program. You may have heard of that related to potentially your thermostats that you may participate in that program. It's similar for EVs. And the other for daily peak, to address that piece of the puzzle, we have the off-peak charging program. And one thing to note is that you can only participate in one program at a time. Next slide, please. Thank you. On the Connected Solutions program, it will temporarily pause your charging when events are called during the hottest summer days. The Connected Solutions EV program provides a $50 enrollment incentive and a $20 annual incentive to have your charging pause during those times. It's an automatic signal that's sent from the platform, the technology platform that we use, and it will pause your charging between June and September between the hours of 2 and 7 p.m. And then once the event ends, and it will resume after that 2 or 3 hour period. Typically for National Grid, we call about 40 events during the summers, and customers will have the opportunity to opt out of an event. So if you really do need to charge during that 2 to 7 p.m. window, you will be able to opt out and continue your charging. Next slide, please. So these are, for the Connected Solutions program, these are the supported vehicles that we have available through our platform. It connects through vehicle telematics. You'll hear from Eversource in a minute, and the programs are different. We are looking at the data and pausing of your charging through the vehicle telematics itself, whereas Eversource is doing it through your home charger. And the web address for the program is on the bottom of that screen. So if any vehicles are added or updated, updates will be made right to that program website. These are a few frequently asked questions about the Connected Solutions EV program. I won't go through all of them, but the one main thing, to note, as I mentioned, this is through vehicle telematics, so you don't need to have Wi-Fi. And if you're going to be participating, will it hurt your battery? It will. It won't hurt your battery. It won't affect your warranty. And even if you, for whatever reason, you don't charge during that 2 to 7 p.m. window, you can still participate in the Connected Solutions program. You don't have to respond to an event and technically pause your charging to receive that $20 annual incentive. And then these slides will be shared, so you'll be able to read through the remaining FAQs here. And I'll move on to the off-peak program. Thank you. So this off-peak program, as I mentioned, is to address the daily peak that Anna went over. For the off-peak program, this is for our Massachusetts electric territory, as is the Connected Solutions program. And it is a mobile app. It's called Charge Smart MA. And this is where you'd be able to look at your charging sessions as well as any rebates earned through the program right in the app. You can find it on Google Play or the App Store. So what are the off-peak hours? Off-peak hours are from 9 p.m. to 1 p.m. the following day, Monday through Friday. So from Friday night, midnight to Saturday, 1 p.m. does not count. That counts as on-peak. When you enroll in the program, you will receive a $50 enrollment bonus. And then after that, the more off-peak charging you do, depending on the month and the season, you will earn a rebate of 3 cents October through May, and then 5 cents June to September. Rebates are earned in 1 month and paid out the following month as either an on-bill credit right onto your electric bill, or we can disperse that through PayPal. Next slide, please. So how do you enroll? So check your compatibility. I'm going to get to that next, but it's on our program webpage. See which vehicles are compatible with our technology platform. Download the app from either the Google Play or Apple Store. Register with your National Grid profile that you've created to look at your electric bill or your gas bill. And you connect your compatible EV and or home charger right to through the app, and then you'll begin to start earning rebates. Next slide, please. So for the through October, these are the current compatible equipment for our technology platform. We have many vehicles on here, but I realize that there are some EVs that are not listed here. And for that, if you are interested and want information when those will be available, there is a waitlist form that you can fill out on our program webpage. It's listed right there on the bottom of that page. And currently, the only home charger that we are compatible with is the ChargePoint Home Flex charger. We are working to add more functionality and more vehicles and more chargers, but they are up and coming. So please fill out the waitlist form so we know what you're looking for. Next slide, please. So again, just to reiterate that customers can only participate in one program at a time. You can switch programs if you begin this journey through the Connected Solutions program and next year you want to join the off-peak program, you can do that, but you will only receive the $50 enrollment bonus from one program. So that's the quick hits, and these are the program web pages for both programs. And I guess we'll take questions after, but so turn this over to Hannah.
Anna, you should have control if you want to advance the slides, and I can do it if you prefer.
All right, I'll see if it's working for me. All right. Okay, so thanks for joining, everyone. Again, I'm Hannah Lyons, and I'm going to be presenting on the Eversource Connected Solutions EV charging program. Okay, so this is an overview of all the demand response programs offered by Eversource. We have two classifications within commercial and industrial and residential programs, which are daily programs meant to target the summer daily peaks, and what we call targeted programs, which hit the system peaks. Within the residential programs, the battery program is a daily program, and the thermostat and EV charging programs are targeted programs, meaning that they have fewer events during the year. Also, as Sejal said, we should note that our EV program operates through charging, not EV telematics, so it's a difference. So most of the EV event parameters are the same as National Grid. One key difference is that this program has max 15 events, not 40 during the summer season. The program lasts from June 1st to September 30th. Events are called between 2 to 7 p.m. and are 2 or 3 hours long. When an event is called, the charging load of the EV charger is lowered to about that of a level 1 charger, but no lower than 1.8 kilowatts. And incentives are $50 upfront, and then you get a $20 incentive per year for participating in the program. So to be eligible for the program, you have to be an Eversource electric customer, and you have to own one of the eligible level 2 connected chargers. You can find the list below, which is on our website. There's also a link which you can access once the slide deck is shared. Also should note that Cape Cod residents are not currently eligible to participate in the program. Okay, so pretty short. Thanks for listening. And again, the slide deck will be shared, so there's a link to sign up there.
I'll jump back in now. Thank you, Hannah. We'll shortly move straight to Q&A because I know there's a lot of good questions coming in. But before we do that, I just want to give a sort of sneak peek / update that Hannah and Sejal have been presenting on what is currently available, but more could be coming. So some of you might have been following our other webinars or our blogs, but National Grid and Eversource both proposed really big EV programs in dockets at the Department of Public Utilities. This started last summer, and Green Energy Consumers was an official intervener in that process. So we are all in the same boat now, waiting for the DPU to issue a final order on what the utilities are permitted to do. And once that happens, there could be new programs. There could be lots of interesting stuff happening. So definitely keep an eye out on your email, because once that's approved, we will write a blog post and we will host another webinar, because there will be good stuff in that final order, including information about smart charging, but also a lot of other topics related to electric transportation. In the meantime, if you have an extra hour and 8 minutes and really want to dig into this, you can watch a webinar recording that we did a couple months ago about what was proposed in those dockets and what we as green energy consumers thought about it. So when we share these slides, you'll get access to the link to that recording. It's on our YouTube channel right now. But that webinar will tell you all about what is in those dockets. And then once we know what will actually come out of it, we'll talk about that too. So with that, I will move on to the Q&A portion of this. I'll stop sharing my screen and open up the questions. I know we've gotten a lot of good questions, so I will do my best to sort through them. So bear with me for a moment. One question is, why do you only support the use of certain chargers? Maybe Sejal can take that first, or actually whoever wants to take it first, go for it.
So I mean, I'll start. So for us, it's I think just to back up one step too, is that each individual home charger manufacturer has different software and different, whether it's open source or not. And so there's a lot that goes into technically connecting that charger to our platform. So it does take time. So we are working to add more chargers. We're not specifying one over another. It just happens to be that that one's already integrated with our platform.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I'll add that it has to be a level 2 charger and Wi-Fi connected. And also it's just going through the integration process. We're definitely open to adding more chargers though.
Okay. There was one question referring to earlier on in the presentation when I was talking about emissions, asking whether the emissions included or do not include the emissions emitted by the utility grid for each time we charge the vehicles. And those figures did include the emissions associated with generating and delivering the electricity to charge your car. So if you are driving a battery electric vehicle, you have 0 tailpipe emissions. So the emissions that we were presenting there are the ones associated with generating that electricity. There's one question which I'm not sure if you will have an immediate answer to, is the Nissan Leaf is one of the earliest EVs that was available, but it looks like it's not supported in the National Grid program telematically. Do you have an explanation for that, or is that a more technical question that we should ask somebody in the program itself?
Yeah, and it's a similar answer to the charger piece, where it is, Nissan has their own vehicle telematics, and we are testing whether we can integrate with it, and whether the data that's coming from it is reliable, whether it's missing any charging sessions, whether so there's a lot of variables that we're working through. So it is something that we would like to bring to customers and have that be available, but right now we're not comfortable with having basing our rebates off of it yet.
Another question, which is for each utility and each program, are the incentives that you talked about per household or per vehicle? So basically, if somebody has 2 EVs, how do they interact with these programs?
So for us, it is per EV charger.
And for National Grid, it's for the off-peak program, it is we're limited to 2 EVs per National Grid account number or 1 home charger. So we don't want the home charger and the vehicle to be at one spot and sending data and participating the same way. So 2 vehicles or 1 home charger. And Connected Solutions, I believe, I'm not familiar enough with their requirements, so I'd have to get back to you on that one for the National Grid Connected Solutions piece.
There's one question, which is, do home chargers typically have a timer? So you can plug it in when you get home during the day, but tell it to not start charging until the middle of the night. I can answer that real quick. Yes, if you have a smart charger, one of these Wi-Fi enabled chargers, you can program when to start charging on the charger, but some vehicles allow you to do that through the vehicle itself. Hannah or Sejal, if you have anything to add to that, please do. Okay. This is a particularly relevant question for, I think, a lot of people right now, which is, if I am participating in my town's green municipal aggregation program, how can I still access these smart charging programs or not?
So for National Grid, you can, because that's aggregation is part of your supply, and we're still transmitting electricity to, so you're still a National Grid customer. So you'd still be able to participate in one of our programs.
Yeah, for Eversource, you still can participate.
Another question that is on a lot of people's minds right now is the anticipated changes in electricity rates for the coming sort of 6-month period. Is there a chance that the rebate amounts will be revisited in light of that, or when's the next time that sort of new programs might be proposed? the question was asked specifically about the off-peak charging rebate, but I'm kind of expanding it to also cover connected solutions.
Yeah, so I've gotten that question before as well. So we are definitely looking at the rates. So our current program, the off-peak program, has been around since January of this year. So we have, 10 months worth of data to look through and assess our rebate amounts. We are still waiting, as Anna mentioned, the order from the DPU for our last filing. So it will have to go through some sort of docket and a filing to change the rate. So it's not something that we can do quickly or just on our own. It's something that would have to be approved by the DPU.
Yeah, I mean, same answer.
Okay. General question, I think. So National Grid has an off-peak charging and connected solutions. Eversource only has connected solutions. Can you speak to that, Hannah?
Yeah, so we are proposing adding EV telematics as another way to connect to the demand response program, and also moving more towards an off-peak charging model. So those are things that we're proposing. It again has to be approved. So we'll see what ultimately ends up being approved.
Okay. Are there any programs where if you charge your car at night and it is plugged in and you don't need it during the day, that you can discharge electricity back onto the grid during peak demand times?
So I think that would be a vehicle to grid kind of program. We don't have that currently, but it's definitely something we're looking into and thinking about.
Yeah, same for National Grid, and it depends on the technology as well, because a lot of the vehicles don't have the technical capability to provide juice back to the grid or chargers. They don't go both ways. There are some that are coming out that will be able to do that, so it's definitely something that we're looking at and researching.
I will say on this front, that is sort of like the cutting edge of this work, and I think something we're all working towards, because EVs are one way of looking at them, giant batteries on wheels, and could really help balance out supply and demand. There is a really cool program in Beverly, Massachusetts right now where they are feeding electricity back to the grid from the electric school buses that they have purchased, and that is really cool. I got a chance to see them this summer on one of those peak days where the technician could say, like, this bus will be discharging today to lower today's peak, and that is sort of a glimpse of the future. It will probably likely be easier with fleet vehicles like school buses to do that because they have more predictable routes than people. But I think that is something that we're keeping an eye on at Green Energy Consumers, because it's really exciting, and hope our utility friends are working on it too. Okay. Sorry, there's lots of questions I'm trying to read through. So there are some folks who have EV chargers at more than one location. How do they do the right thing? Do they sign up at every, like if they have one place where they live in a summer home, for example, can they sign up at both places? Is it just a matter of what electric account number you're looking at?
So for Eversource, you can sign up both chargers at both locations, and yeah, there should be separate electric accounts for each location. So you would just use that account when you sign up.
Yeah, same answer for National Grid as far as the chargers go for the off-peak program, but for the vehicles, you wouldn't be able to register or connect the same VIN number more twice, basically. You're not gonna be able to do that.
This might be a record for most questions we've gotten in a webinar. So one clarifying question is, with the National Grid program with a credit on the electricity rate, that is a credit just on the electrical usage of the vehicle, not all electrical usage in the house. But that is a nice transition to another question is, do Eversource and National Grid have programs like this for other uses of electricity?
So our Connected Solutions program for National Grid, I think similar to Eversource, we have the thermostat program where folks, and this is for gas heating, but not for electrical, I guess, or any heating. If you have a Wi-Fi enabled thermostat, it would lower your usage during system peaks. That's the one I could think of off the top of my head. I'm sure we have others.
Yeah, so for residential programs, there's a thermostat program and a battery program.
One question is, how long does it typically take to sign up for these programs, from like the day that you fill out the application to when you're actually starting to track electricity use and receive these incentives?
So I think I would say about 2 weeks. You submit an application online, and then goes to the charger manufacturer, who checks to make sure that the charger is online and set up, and then finally you'll be approved in the program.
So for National Grid's Connected Solutions program, similar to what Hannah just said, but it would go to the vehicle manufacturer's web address. And then for the off-peak program, it's about maybe 10 minutes. It depends, how fast you can download your app, log into if you remember your National Grid profile account information, and then just connect your vehicle or your home charger with the appropriate manufacturer credentials. Once you're connected, once the device is connected to the app and you start charging during off-peak times, you'll start earning your rebates. So if you earn your rebates in the month of October, you'll see them on your November electric bill or PayPal.
There are a couple of questions here from people who say like they're interested, but they already have a quote unquote dumb charger, one that is not hooked up to Wi-Fi. Are there incentives to help them upgrade to a smart charger? Because that is an expense, a new expense. I will say that with National Grid's program, if you qualify for the vehicle telematics, that's one way to get around having to install a new charger. But for those people who can't do that because of the vehicle they drive, I think the answer is that not currently, but perhaps soon, depending on what the DPU approves.
Yeah, I think we don't have incentives just for chargers right now, but if you get an eligible charger and then sign up for the program, you will get incentive. And we are proposing adding an EV telematics kind of program. So you possibly in the future, if you have an eligible EV, might be able to participate in a similar program.
Yeah, Anna, we don't. Sorry, I was going to say National Grid doesn't have a residential charger rebate program right now. But if and when we get the approvals from DPU, that is something that we've proposed.
Okay, let me see. Does it matter if I have solar panels and generate my own power, but clearly take power from the grid at night? Does that impact incentives through this program?
Not for our programs.
Yeah, that shouldn't impact the incentives.
And to dig into that a little bit more, I think the question was probably relating specifically to off-peak charging, that you might be charging on peak, but because you have solar panels, be drawing from the power that you're generating. But you still qualify for the incentive because reducing your consumption means that your solar energy can go deal with somebody else's power demand. So it's still a good thing for the system if you are incentivized not to charge at that time. Let's see. A general question is, why are EV programs separated from general electricity use? Wouldn't managing all of a home's energy this way be better from a grid and environmental perspective? I can also take a crack at this if you'd like, but we'll always give you the first.
Yeah, why don't you take a crack at it first?
Yes.
I think in an ideal world, slash we are working towards this ideal world, we will have whole home time of use rates or some sort of incentives to push loads like dishwashers or hot water heaters that run on electricity or all sorts of other electrical demand off peak. But we live in an area that does not have smart meters that captures data on an interval, a small enough interval to make that possible. So the electric utility, because we have old meters, does not have insight right now into when you are using your dishwasher or running your air conditioning. So that level of insight into data is not possible at this moment. There's a whole other docket that we talked about in that webinar that I had a screenshot of about the grid modernization efforts of the electric utilities, which will work us towards a place where we do have that level of insight into electricity usage. But distributing those smart meters to everybody in Massachusetts is a big undertaking. So while we wait for that to happen, we can focus on EVs specifically because there are ways to do that through the telematics and the smart chargers that don't require a new smart meter. And because electric vehicles are such a significant load that we definitely don't want to wait for those smart meters to be in place before we start managing the demand that they put on the grid. So I think this is a sort of a stepping stone to that future where there's smart charging for all electrical appliances. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Great answer.
Great. As long as nobody asks me detailed questions about the grid mod dockets, I don't remember those, but EVs we can talk about. Let's see. We should have just a couple more minutes. So there's one question, a little bit of hesitation that, okay, a level 2 charger, that's smart. I understand that I need to get one to participate in the program. But is there a risk that 1 year down the line, that charger won't qualify anymore? Is there any sort of, should I be hesitant about that in case the programs change in the future?
So this program is approved for 3 years, for 2022 through 2024. So there shouldn't be any change with the charger program through 2024.
Sorry, trying to get myself off mute. For the off-peak program, it is, that integration, and I think that's their concern potentially where that question's coming from with that particular charger. That's been our platform, the technology provider that we have, but they've had that relationship and integration for a while now, and it is updated continually. So if the manufacturer makes changes, we also make changes and keep up with it. So I don't see that going away, and we're looking to add more chargers.
Okay. I am scrolling through all of these questions. One that I think we haven't touched on yet is that for the list of chargers that work for these programs, people did not see Tesla chargers specifically. Is that because the Tesla vehicles can communicate via telematics, or does that mean that Tesla vehicles don't qualify from these programs?
So currently, Tesla chargers are not eligible. If we were to enroll Tesla vehicles, it would be through the EV telematics.
So a Tesla driver can still participate. It's just a different route of communicating the data.
Yeah, for National Grid, Tesla vehicles are eligible for both connected solutions and for the off-peak program. So that's why Tesla chargers are not in the program.
Okay. I think what I will do, I will first recognize that there are more questions than we can get to today, but I hope I tried to cobble lots of questions together into more general questions, so I hope I touched on most things. One other question that we got was just a reminder to any friends from Rhode Island who are on this call. National Grid used to be the electric utility for Rhode Island and had very similar programs there, but that is now separate. A new company came in and bought that business in Rhode Island, and so the new electric utility in Rhode Island is called Rhode Island Energy, which to my knowledge does not currently have any EV incentive programs, but we will come back to that in another webinar. Yes, sorry, I'm just gonna see more questions coming in, but it is almost 1, so I want to be respectful of people's time. We have just a couple of slides to return to, and then I'll close us out, but I will send out a follow-up email probably tomorrow, and I'll do my best to summarize some of the questions and answers that we got in that email, and get to maybe some of the ones that we didn't get to in this presentation. So thank you again to Sejal and Hannah for joining us today. Here is everybody's contact information if you want to follow up with any one of us specifically. Sejal and Hannah, particularly if you have questions about your specific enrollment in one of these programs, can forward you to the right people at Eversource and National Grid to respond to those. And I am happy to answer any and all questions just in general. If you enjoyed this webinar, we just want to let you know that this is Green Energy Consumers' 40th year as an organization. We just had our 40th annual meeting a couple weeks ago, but I would be remiss and scolded by my boss if I did not have a slide saying your donations are welcome. If you appreciated this content and want to see more work like this and are able to, we are always grateful for any and all support so that we can do more work like this. But with that, it's just about 1 o'clock, so I will close us out with another thanks to Hannah and Sejal, and I'll be in touch soon with a follow-up email, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.